I hadn't seen my nephew, Jack, in 10 years. We had a falling out when he was a teenager, and he never looked back. I had given up hope of ever seeing him again. But as I walked down the street, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. And then, I saw him. He was standing on the corner, holding a cardboard sign that read *, please help me, I'm homeless *. I felt a pang in my chest as I approached him cautiously, not wanting to startle him. "Jack, is that you?" I asked, trying to keep my emotions in check. He looked up, startled, and our eyes met for the first time in a decade. I could see the shock and embarrassment written all over his face. "Uncle," he muttered, looking away. I took a deep breath and tried to process what I was seeing. My nephew, the same boy who had ignored me for so long, was now standing in front of me, begging for money. "What happened, Jack?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He hesitated before speaking. "I lost my job, and I couldn't pay my rent. I've been living on the streets for weeks." I felt a wave of anger wash over me. How could he let things get this bad? But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something there that gave me pause. It was a deep-seated fear, a fear of failure. I took a deep breath and made a decision on the spot. "I'll give you the money, but you have to come live with me for 6 months." He looked at me incredulously. "Why would you do that?" I smiled wryly, "Because family is supposed to help each other out, no matter what." He nodded, and I could see the relief wash over him. As we walked to my car, I couldn't help but wonder what had led him to this point. What secrets was he hiding? And what would I uncover as we spent more time together? Little did I know, our journey was just beginning, and it would take us down a path of discovery, betrayal, and ultimately, revenge. As we drove to my house, the tension between us was palpable. I could sense Jack's unease, his uncertainty about what lay ahead. I, on the other hand, was determined to get to the bottom of his story. I had always been a curious person, and the fact that my nephew had been living on the streets for weeks only added to my determination. As we pulled into the driveway, Jack's eyes widened in surprise. "This is your house?" he asked, his voice laced with awe. I nodded, smiling. "Yes, it's been my home for over 20 years. We stepped inside, and Jack's eyes scanned the room, taking in the comfortable furniture and the warm decor. He looked like a man who had been living in a different world, one that was harsh and unforgiving. I gestured for him to sit down, and he did, his eyes never leaving mine. "So, Jack," I began, my voice firm but gentle. "Tell me what happened. How did you end up on the streets?" He hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. I could sense his fear, his reluctance to open up. But I also saw something else, something that gave me hope. I saw a glimmer of determination, a resolve to turn his life around. "I lost my job," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't pay my rent, and I ended up on the streets." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "That's not the whole story, Jack. I can see it in your eyes. There's more to it than that." He sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "You're right," he said. "I'm in debt, Uncle. $60,000 worth of debt. I was making payments, but then I lost my job, and I couldn't keep up." I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my cool. "Who did you borrow from, Jack?" He looked away, his voice barely audible. "A loan shark. I know it was stupid, but I was desperate. I thought I could pay it back, but it just kept getting worse and worse." I took a deep breath, trying to process what I was hearing. A loan shark? $60,000 worth of debt? This was serious. I knew I had to tread carefully, but I also knew I had to get to the bottom of this. "Okay, Jack," I said, my voice firm but calm. "We'll deal with this. But first, I need to know more. What else is going on? What else are you hiding?" He looked up, his eyes flashing with fear. "Nothing, Uncle. That's all there is." I raised an eyebrow, my skepticism clear. "Don't lie to me, Jack. I can see it in your eyes. There's more to this story." And I'm going to find out what it is. He looked away, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I knew I had him cornered, but I also knew I had to be careful. I didn't want to push him too far, not yet. But I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. As we sat there, the tension between us was palpable. I could sense Jack's fear, his uncertainty about what lay ahead. But I also saw something else, something that gave me hope. I saw a glimmer of determination, a resolve to turn his life around. And I was determined to help him, no matter what it took. Little did I know, our journey was just beginning, and it would take us down a path of discovery, betrayal, and ultimately, revenge. As the days passed, Jack settled into a routine at my house. He would wake up early, go for a run, and then help me with various tasks around the house. He was quiet and reserved, but I could see the determination in his eyes. He was determined to turn his life around, to make a fresh start. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew that the loan shark was still out there, waiting for his money. And I knew that Jack was hiding something from me. I could see it in his eyes, the way he would glance over his shoulder, the way he would hesitate before answering my questions. I was determined to get to the bottom of it, to find out what he was hiding. But I also knew that I had to be careful. I didn't want to push him too far, not yet. One day, as we were working in the garden, Jack's phone rang. He hesitated before answering it, his eyes darting towards me. I could see the fear in his eyes, the uncertainty. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice low. He hesitated before answering. "I don't know," he said finally. "It's a blocked number." I raised an eyebrow. "Answer it," I said. He hesitated before picking up the phone. "Hello," he said, his voice cautious. There was a pause, and then his eyes widened in fear. "What do you want?" he said, his voice low. I could sense the tension in his body, the way he was gripping the phone. I knew that something was wrong. "Who is it?" I asked again, my voice firm. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "It's them," he said. "The loan shark. They want their money." I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my cool. "Tell them you'll pay," I said. Jack hesitated before speaking. "I'll pay," he said. "But you have to leave me alone. I need time." There was a pause, and then Jack's eyes widened in fear. "What did they say?" I asked, my voice low. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "They said they'll give me a week," he said. "If I don't pay, they'll hurt me." "They'll hurt you too." I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew that we were in danger. But I also knew that I wasn't going to back down. I was going to protect Jack, no matter what it took. "Don't worry," I said. "We'll figure something out. We'll pay them off, or we'll find a way to deal with them." Jack nodded, his eyes still wide with fear. But I could see the determination in his eyes, the resolve to turn his life around. And I knew that I was going to be right there with him, every step of the way. As we continued to work in the garden, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. I knew that we were in danger, that the loan shark was still out there, waiting for his money. But I also knew that I wasn't going to back down. I was going to protect Jack, no matter what it took. And I was going to get to the bottom of his secrets, no matter what it took. Little did I know, our journey was just beginning, and it would take us down a path of discovery, betrayal, and ultimately, revenge. The phone call had set off a chain of events that would lead us down a dark and twisted path. But I was ready for it. I was ready to face whatever came our way, head on. As the days passed, the tension in the house grew thicker. Jack was on edge, constantly looking over his shoulder, waiting for the loan shark to make his move. I could see the fear in his eyes, the way he would jump at every little noise. I tried to reassure him, to tell him that everything would be okay, but deep down, I knew that it wouldn't be easy. The loan shark was a ruthless man, and he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. One night, as we were sitting in the living room, I heard a knock at the door. Jack's eyes widened in fear, and he grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Don't answer it," he whispered. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. But then I remembered the determination in my eyes, the resolve to protect Jack. I got up and walked to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked through the peephole and saw a tall, menacing figure standing on the porch. He was dressed in a black suit, his face twisted into a scowl. I knew that it was the loan shark, and I knew that I had to be careful. I took a deep breath and opened the door, my heart pounding in my chest. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The loan shark sneered at me, his eyes glinting with malice. "You're the one who's been harboring my debtor," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I'm here to collect my money." I stood my ground, my eyes locked on his. "We don't have the money," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The loan shark sneered at me, his eyes glinting with malice. "I don't believe you," he said. "I think you're hiding something from me." He took a step closer to me, his eyes glinting with menace. I could feel the fear rising up in my chest, but I stood my ground, my eyes locked on his. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The loan shark sneered at me, his eyes glinting with malice. "We'll see about that," he said, and he took another step closer to me. I could feel the tension building up inside me, the fear rising up in my chest. But I stood my ground, my eyes locked on his. I knew that I had to protect Jack, no matter what it took. And I knew that I wouldn't back down, no matter what the loan shark did. The loan shark took another step closer to me, his eyes glinting with menace. I could feel the fear rising up in my chest, but I stood my ground, my eyes locked on his. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The loan shark froze, his eyes glinting with surprise. And then he turned and ran, disappearing into the night. I was left standing there, my heart pounding in my chest, my eyes wide with fear. But as I turned to go back inside, I saw Jack standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with fear. "What happened?" he asked, his voice shaking. I took a deep breath and tried to explain, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. All I could do was stand there, my eyes wide with fear, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stood there, frozen in fear, Jack took a step closer to me. "Uncle, what happened?" he asked again, his voice shaking. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't explain what had just happened, couldn't make sense of it. The loan shark had just been standing there, his eyes glinting with menace, and then he had turned and run. It didn't make any sense. Jack took another step closer to me, his eyes wide with fear. "Uncle, please tell me what's going on," he said, his voice shaking. I took a deep breath and tried to speak, but the words still caught in my throat. I couldn't explain what had just happened, couldn't make sense of it. The loan shark had just been standing there, his eyes glinting with menace, and then he had turned and run. It didn't make any sense. Suddenly, Jack's eyes widened in fear. "What was that noise?" he asked, his voice shaking. I listened, and then I heard it too. A faint scratching sound, coming from the back of the house. It was a soft, gentle sound, but it sent shivers down my spine. "I don't know," I said, my voice low. "But we need to check it out." Jack nodded, his eyes wide with fear. We crept through the house, our hearts pounding in our chests. The scratching sound grew louder, more insistent. We followed it to the back of the house, where we found a small window open. The scratching sound was coming from outside, from the bushes. Jack's eyes widened in fear. "What is it?" he asked, his voice shaking. I shook my head. "I don't know," I said. "But we need to be careful." We crept closer to the window, our hearts pounding in our chests. The scratching sound grew louder, more insistent. And then, suddenly, it stopped. The silence was oppressive, heavy with tension. Jack's eyes widened in fear. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice shaking. I took a deep breath and tried to think. We couldn't just stand there, waiting for whatever was outside to make its move. We had to do something, had to take action. "We need to check the yard," I said, my voice low. Jack nodded, his eyes wide with fear. We crept out into the yard, our hearts pounding in our chests. The darkness was oppressive, heavy with tension. We searched the yard, but found nothing. No sign of whatever had been making the scratching sound. But as we turned to go back inside, I saw something. A piece of paper, caught in the bushes. I walked over to it, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw what was written on it. A message, scrawled in red ink. "You can't hide forever," it said. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who had written this? And what did they want? Jack's eyes widened in fear as he saw the message. "What does it mean?" he asked, his voice shaking. I shook my head. "I don't know," I said. "But we need to be careful." We crept back inside, our hearts pounding in our chests. The message had left us with more questions than answers. Who had written it? And what did they want? But one thing was certain. We were in grave danger. As we stood in the living room, staring at the message, I could feel the tension building up inside me. Who had written this? And what did they want? The words "you can't hide forever" seemed to echo in my mind, sending shivers down my spine. Jack's eyes were wide with fear, and I knew that he was thinking the same thing. We were in grave danger. Suddenly, the phone rang, breaking the silence. I hesitated for a moment before answering it, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then a voice spoke up. "You're hiding something," it said. "And I'm going to find out what it is." I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was this? And how did they know what was going on? "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice firm. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then the voice spoke up again. "You'll find out soon enough," it said. "But for now, just know that I'm watching you. And I'll be coming for you soon." The line went dead, and I was left standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned to Jack, who was staring at me with wide eyes. "What did they say?" he asked, his voice shaking. I took a deep breath and tried to explain, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't believe what was happening. We were being stalked, and I had no idea who was behind it or what they wanted. Jack's eyes were wide with fear, and I knew that he was thinking the same thing. We were in grave danger. Suddenly, I heard a noise outside. It was a faint scratching sound, coming from the window. I felt a chill run down my spine. What was going on? And who was behind it? Jack's eyes widened in fear as he heard the noise. "What is it?" he asked, his voice shaking. I shook my head. "I don't know," I said. "But we need to be careful." We crept over to the window, our hearts pounding in our chests. The scratching sound grew louder, more insistent. And then, suddenly, it stopped. The silence was oppressive, heavy with tension. Jack's eyes were wide with fear, and I knew that he was thinking the same thing. We were in grave danger. Suddenly, I saw a figure outside the window. It was a person, dressed in black, and they were staring right at us. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who was this? And what did they want? Jack's eyes widened in fear as he saw the figure. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice shaking. I took a deep breath and tried to think. We couldn't just stand there, waiting for whatever was outside to make its move. We had to do something, had to take action. "We need to call the police," I said, my voice firm. Jack nodded, his eyes wide with fear. We crept over to the phone, our hearts pounding in our chests. But as we reached for it, I heard a noise. It was a faint creaking sound, coming from the floorboards. I felt a chill run down my spine. What was going on? And who was behind it? Jack's eyes widened in fear as he heard the noise. "What is it?" he asked, his voice shaking. I shook my head. "I don't know," I said. "But we need to be careful." As we stood there, frozen in fear, the creaking sound grew louder, more insistent. It was as if the floorboards were being deliberately manipulated, as if someone was trying to make their presence known. And then, suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. Jack's eyes were wide with fear as he grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "What's going on?" he whispered. I shook my head, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know, I said. But we need to get out of here, now. We stumbled through the darkness, our hands outstretched in front of us. We reached the front door and flung it open, revealing a figure standing on the porch. It was the lone shark, his eyes glinting with malice. You can't hide forever, he sneered. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything went black. I came to, groggily, to find myself in a hospital bed. Jack was sitting beside me, his eyes red from crying. Uncle, he said, his voice shaking. I was so scared. I thought I was going to lose you. I smiled weakly, my heart still racing from the ordeal. I'm okay, kiddo, I said. But we need to tell the police what happened. Jack nodded, his eyes wide with determination. We'll get him, Uncle. We'll make him pay. And with that, the police arrived, and we told them everything. The loan shark was arrested, and we finally got the justice we deserved. But the best part was yet to come. As we were leaving the hospital, Jack turned to me with a mischievous grin. Uncle, he said. I have something to show you. He led me to the parking lot, where a brand new car was waiting. It was a beautiful, sleek vehicle, with a big bow on the hood. I bought it for you, Jack said, his eyes shining with tears. I wanted to say thank you, for everything you've done for me. I was overwhelmed with emotion, my heart full of love and gratitude. Jack, I said, my voice shaking. I don't know what to say. Jack just smiled and hugged me, his arms tight around my waist. Just say you're proud of me, Uncle, he said. And with that, I knew that everything was going to be okay. We had been through hell and back, but we had made it out alive. And as we drove away in our new car, I knew that we were going to be just fine. The lone shark had thought he could ruin our lives, but in the end, he had only brought us closer together. And as we drove off into the sunset, I knew that we were going to have a bright, beautiful future ahead of us. We had been given a second chance, and we were going to make the most of it. The lone shark had tried to destroy us, but in the end, he had only made us stronger. And as we drove away, I knew that we were going to be just fine. We were going to be happy, and we were going to be free.